On the immigration side, I just don't understand why people are so freaked out about immigration, other than that it's a race issue. Because the immigrants in the United States are doing the jobs that the United States, born in the United States population doesn't want to do.
Hello and welcome to The Focus. I'm Dr. John Bruni. Today we welcome back political historian Dr. Roy Casagranda for what promises to be another compelling conversation. Since January, Donald Trump has returned to the Oval Office, unleashing a torrent of executive action, shaking up his cabinet and reasserting his vision of American exceptionalism. But what kind of presidency are we actually witnessing? Is Trump the ultimate deal-maker pursuing peace in Ukraine and Gaza, or a populist surrounded by ideologues? And what impact do stories like the Epstein scandal and the Trump-Musk split, or even the rise of new political voices like Zoran Mandani, have on the American body politic? Roy Casagranda brings his unmatched clarity and historical context to help us make sense of this moment and where it might take us. Let's dive in. Roy, welcome back to The Focus.
Thanks for having me back, John.
Roy, in our previous conversation, we examined the first 100 days of Trump 47. Is the administration now more stable or more chaotic?
I guess it depends on what your definition of chaos is, because I feel like chaos has been redefined. Just the fact that he's now, now as Trump is bringing back the conversation about tariffs, it feels like, oh, so we're going to loop back to that, and he's imposing them. So, we're going to punish Brazil and Canada, our two worst enemies.
Hmm.
When I think of alliance building, my goal is to always punish my allies. Everybody should hate their allies. It makes total sense.
They are very annoying, Roy, I must say.
It's terrible, especially Canada, our number one
Uh,
trading partner. Yeah,
they're
we
just
should
they're just too
derail that relationship.
they're just too nice. And let's not even go to Greenland. I mean, I know that the Panamanians, they've got their issues, but poor old Greenland, hey? Considering all of this, then, Roy, do you think that now with the Epstein scandal having taken center stage and having probably nobbled, we'll go into it in a little bit more detail later, but maybe it has nobbled a little bit of the Trump administration. Do you think that Trump will now look for a big headline grabbing thing to distract people's attention away from Epstein? I hear that Rosie O'Donnell may have her citizenship revoked and be kicked back to Ireland, but I don't think that that's going to do the job, do you?
No, but it's interesting his obsession with her. Like, uh, you know, this is ancient news, but during the Clinton-Trump campaign, 2016, because the Clinton team knew that Trump was a avid watcher of things like CNN, like he would flip through the channels, they began planting Rosie O'Donnell taunts in advertisements in preparation for the very next debate. And sure enough, he brought her up in the debate and went after her. And so, like at some level, I think everybody thought, man, he's so easy to control. And of course, the reality is, no, he's insane and he's reckless and he's chaotic, but he's not easy to control. So he's going to want to do a distraction. That's
Yeah.
American politics since whenever. I mean, Bill
Mm.
Clinton was the master of wagging the dog. So he's going to want to do that. When he and Elon had their really dramatic breakup, he bombed Iran. We should
Mm.
expect something like that. I think a lot of people on the left and the right were really hoping that the Epstein files would come out, and the fact that they're covering them up in such a blatant and bizarre way, I feel like he has to change the narrative.
Yeah, I think he really has to as well. And I think that if I were a Canadian or somewhere in the inner suburban areas of Nook in Greenland, I'd be trying to dig a bomb shelter sometime about now. But anyway, Roy, how would you now characterize the Trump cabinet? I mean, they've had some time to bed themselves in, so have they grown into their jobs much, or are they just loyalists?
It's hard to say because I'm not sitting in those meetings, but whenever they do show those meetings, it looks like a bunch of sycophants who just constantly suck up to him and are saying what a glorious leader he is. I
Mm.
imagine this is what cabinet meetings look like for Mussolini or Hitler or Kim Jong-un. And so
Mm.
from all appearances, yeah, it's just a bunch of suck-ups, which is a catastrophe because you have this person who knows nothing about the world. He doesn't understand basic premise of anything. Like he doesn't know what groceries are. Um, and it's a new word apparently to him, and he's freaked out about it. And now he doesn't have advisors who can give him information because, well, they're always going to tell him what he believes already and what he wants to hear. Um, that's a formula for disaster.
Let's now talk about Trump's recent claims of being a peace broker, because that's another one of his great claims to fame. He hasn't resolved the Ukraine war in 24 hours as promised during his campaign. Actually, it was really funny. I was watching a piece by Ian Bremmer today, and he said that this was never a serious proposition. It was almost like a joke. But I'm wondering how many people who are true believers in the MAGA crowd found that not a proper proposition. I mean, they wanted the end to the war. And, if Trump said 24 hours, they would have thought, well, within a short time frame. But of course, nothing's happened. There's no peace in Gaza. His intervention in the recent Israel-Iran 12-day war was not a peaceful one. Is Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's public support, as well as the support of Pakistan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Guinea-Bissau for Trump getting the Nobel Peace Prize, based on anything real that you're aware of?
Yeah, the answer is no. Um, he- the reality is he says stuff. Uh, it's hard to understand what's going through his mind when he says it. Uh, from what I can tell of him and his personality and his narcissism, when he said he was going to resolve the Ukraine-Russia war in 24 hours, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually believed it. Um, the crazy thing about being that kind of a narcissist is your grasp of reality is close to zero. So in his tiny walnut-sized brain, it is entirely possible that he thought, I can really do this. Putin loves me, and I'll just put a lot of pressure on Zelensky. Regardless, though, of what he was thinking, the reality is that at least 30% of the US public believed what he said to be literal, not figurative. They believed that he could really do it. And I'm saying at least 30% because the percent could certainly be higher, but there is a population of the public that no matter what he says or does, they automatically believe it to be basically the word of Jesus Christ himself. And that, and if he's not the second coming, he's certainly, a voice for their understanding of Christianity. And as a result, it's, Ian Bremmer can go, well, you can't possibly have taken that seriously, but there's that 30% that did. And unfortunately, here's what I don't understand about electoral republics. And I'm not an expert on Australia, so I don't know if this applies to Australia or not. So but from what I can tell, I think it applies in most electoral republics. People believe what their politicians are saying to them in speeches. Where's the cynicism? Why aren't people going, oh my God, how is he going to deliver? I want to see the details. Show me how you're going to make this policy happen. Why are they like, he will get in there and he will do X, Y, and Z. I know he will. Like, what is that? How people approach politics the way they approach religion, like it's all faith-based, which is insane because if you have elections every 4 years or every 2 years or whatever your every 5 years, you would think that by the time a person was 55, they would be completely cynical and wouldn't believe anything that came out of any politician's mouth ever.
The ordinary punter in electoral republics weren't as skeptical as they should be of their political elites. But I would argue that there was this thing called the fourth estate, which
What
is the
is
media.
this?
And the media was meant to have been the conscious of the people, basically. It was meant to just sit there and prognosticate and drill down and interrogate politicians and political leaders as to what they are doing. But we know now all over the West that the media itself is divided between right and left. So it's gone ideological. There is no middle ground, really. I mean, okay, I mean, I'm not being supported by Ground News, so I will say, well, there are platforms like Ground News that try to bring people or bring the fourth estate together into some coherent grouping where you can see the entire political spectrum on display, but it's still not the same as having objective reporting of any particular political leader and their policies. So we do have a problem because if the public isn't skeptical and the media isn't skeptical and everyone's taking sides, where are they going to get their truth from, right? There is no objective truth, right?
I mean, that's the situation we find ourselves in. That I don't think there's a time or place where you could pinpoint and go, this was the best period in human history for news media.
Yeah.
But I think there have been times and places when, at least in the United States, the news media did a much better job than it's doing now. And one of the reasons I think for that was the mindset of the business and the business owners who thought that their job was to look for corruption, look for incompetence, look for inefficiencies, and then report on them.
Yeah.
So they sort of became uh, they became almost a branch of government, right?
Mm.
And since then, the the shift has been to move over to profit margins. And the only thing you care about when you're thinking about profit margins then are ratings, and then the need to bring out good information goes away, and the way the algorithms work, people sort of get tunneled into their own little echo chambers. And so yeah, we're in trouble.
Mm.
If people can't get it's not just to get access to accurate information. Like when I look up the news, I don't go to one source. You
Mm.
can't because that one source has a built-in bias. You need to
Yeah.
triangulate. And
Mm.
if it's an unimportant story to me, I'll go to one source because I just want the headline and maybe a little bit of information. But if it's an important story, I need to
Mm.
go to three, four sources just to make sure I'm getting enough angles on it that the data coming at me isn't skewed, isn't biased. And the majority of people get their news from one source, and it's become TikTok,
Mm.
which is
Uh,
frightening.
it is frightening, but anyway, but in terms of the non-skeptical public, do you think that Trump's messaging on peace is genuine, or is it designed to contrast him with the former Biden administration's more hawkish posture?
So I think part of his problem is he's jealous of Obama, and he really thinks he should get the Nobel Prize. And he thinks that it sucks that a black man got it. He just can't
Mm.
stand it. It's driving him crazy. I mean, we all know he wanted to run for president as early as 1979, the first time he was interviewed and asked the question. I don't know
Mm.
if it was 79, but it was decades ago.
Mm.
But when Obama roasted him, uh, in public. I
Mm.
think that was the moment where he was like, I'm going to become president. I'm going to destroy the planet if I have to do this because I have to show up Obama. So at some level, I think there's this thing of I need that a
Mm.
Nobel Prize so I can at least tie Obama for that. Having said that, I also think the guy is just such a narcissist. He thinks he can be Pope and he
Mm.
thinks that you don't have to he is so blessed with skill and brilliance and understanding of the world he can literally do anything, and I think in his mind he is making the world a better, more peaceful place. I don't know what evidence is being brought to his attention to support this, because I feel like Civil War and World War III are closer than they've been in decades,
Mm.
maybe since 1973.
Yep.
And I can't comprehend how the people around him are okay with the status quo. Like, I get that they're narcissists, or that they're feeding into his narcissism, that they're sycophants, that maybe they think he's going to achieve something, maybe they're just scared. But it's at some level, why aren't we seeing some resignations? Like, why aren't we seeing a little bit of turnover, a little bit more? It worries me when you see that type of a government where there's a guy who's so reckless and it's not causing people to say, I can't do this anymore. I can't be a part of this. When he attacked Iran, he warned Iran, right? So the
Yeah.
Iranians actually managed to move people out of the area. So there's a little bit of a a choreography to this. Like it's almost like he's running a reality TV show. When he
Mm,
bombed Syria in 2017, he did the same thing. He told the Russians, "I'm going to bomb Syria." He told the location. The Russians told the Syrians. Nobody was killed. They destroyed a little bit of dirt runway, and
mm,
you're like, okay.
mm,
You cost the Syrians, $100 in gasoline to drive a tractor around to fix the runway, and you spent $100 million to do it. I don't know why we did this other than it's theater. So I
mm.
think so much of what he does is just a reality TV show production.
Well, what do you say with regard to how Hegseth is running defense and Rubio is running the State Department so far? Because at the moment, it seems that Hegseth he started out strong, cashing in obviously on his good looks and his very macho persona, and then of course he ran into the whole Signalgate thing, and now he's not
Yeah.
looking as strong as he did when he bolted from the gates. And Rubio, I just don't know what's going on with him. It's a funny thing when you observe him in a room. He looks like he's always rolling his eyes or about to roll his eyes at whatever the president is saying. He tries to keep it under control, but ultimately, he plays into the drama, as you just say. It's like theater. Rubio plays his part. Hegseth plays his part. But in the end, America seems to be losing a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so this is what I don't get about this. So for years, we've all said, maybe all is the wrong thing. 99% of us have said that the rich own the politician class. And so at the end of the day, the United States is a plutocracy. There is this class of, billionaires and maybe 100 millionaires who are running the show. They own the senators, they own the representatives, and they may not own the president, but they're
Mm,
definitely influencing the president. So in this moment, when you look at the damage that Trump has done to the economy in such a short period of time, the what he's done to our alliance system, and the fact that, like at the end of the day, everybody in NATO has ruled out the possibility the United States will come to their aid. Like if Russia attacks Lithuania tomorrow, I think everybody understands NATO minus the United States will have to defend Lithuania. So
mm.
you think of when you look at all of that, I can't comprehend why the ruling elite, the rich, are letting this happen. Like, is it really the tax cuts? You're worth $5 billion. You're going to get a tax cut now, make you worth $5.5 billion. Like nothing changed in your life. That can't possibly be the explanation unless that person is just so mentally ill that they're like, I'm willing to risk World War III for that extra $500 million. Like, is that really what's happening? And so I
God, I
feel
hope
like
not.
I must be missing some huge chunk of information. Like maybe aliens have really contacted the US government and they want these policy changes or something. It reminds me of this Outer Limits episode from like 1980 something, where, the aliens come down and they're like, you need to straighten up. And the UN gets together and they make a document that's, like half a meter high, try to solve all the wars on the planet. And they do it in like a 24-hour period. They make world peace. And the aliens come back and they see the document, they start laughing. They go, no, 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 we wanted you to declare war on each other. We hate peaceful planets. Did those guys contact Trump? And now, like that's the path we're on. I feel like we missed something here.
Yeah, look, I mean, I am a bit of a fan of the Outer Limits. Actually, I'm going through the old series right now, so I believe I remember that
Awesome.
episode quite well. Anyway, so having said all of that, Roy, how do American allies and rivals read Trump's deal making? Is this stabilizing, or has it precipitated a permanent change into the international system? I mean, for instance, if we put ourselves in Xi Jinping's shoes just for a second, how do you think he sees Trump, and how do you think his responses to Trump are more along the lines of the rational actor model? That he's taking a very cool approach to what's going on. He's not overplaying his hand. He's waiting for the Americans to trip up, and he's just sitting there reaping whatever the benefits come his way, politically speaking. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, China's in an interesting position because it needs somebody to buy its goods. There's
Yeah.
no better marketplace on the planet than the United States.
mm,
But having said that, in the first Trump administration, China began to decouple from the United States and has been calmly, systematically decoupling. We're probably in year 8 or year 7 of the Chinese
mm,
decoupling, in part because during the Biden administration, Biden didn't actually roll back a lot of what Trump had done. I kind of thought one of the things that Biden might do is jump in there and just undo the trade war with China, and he
mm,
didn't. And I think he thought, I can leverage this. I would have never done this. Trump's already done it. Let's see if we can take the fight one step further. I think that was his calculation. I think what she saw was, oh, I just have to pursue this policy no matter who the president is. I'll just keep doing this. And my understanding of what he's trying to do is he's trying to redirect trade to Europe, to Africa, to Latin America, Australia, right, Indonesia. His
mm,
goal is to replace the United States with the whole rest of the planet, which when you think
mm,
about it, is is brilliant because if you have one crop in the field, if there's a blight, you're ruined economically. In other words, if the United States has a economic downturn, it hurts China. This
mm,
way, if the United States has an economic downturn, China might get hurt, but it's not going to be catastrophically hurt. But the way I read that is people have lost confidence in the United States.
mm,
That the dollar doesn't have the value it used to. Bonds definitely don't have the value that they used to. That the assumption is that the United States is heading towards the exit. It's being handed its hat, and it's time to find another way to run things. And she is a rational actor. He doesn't make big mistakes. He's not flamboyant. He's you know just systematic. He picks away at things. He picked away at the Chinese term limit thing and got rid of the fact that he was only supposed to go 10 years. He's
yeah,
that guy. He's methodical. And having somebody who's Mr. Chaos, who changes policy at turn of, like he turns the corner and he hears a different voice and it changes his policy. And then compare that to Xi, the United States is completely outmatched. The, the future is that the United States is going to be replaced by the Chinese faster than it would have happened had Trump not been president, right? Because Trump has accelerated this process. The question is, how is the world going to adapt to that new
mm,
reality? Um, Multiple states around the planet that we think of as allies have made it very clear that they're now looking towards China, like Egypt and
mm,
UAE joined BRICS.
yeah,
They didn't join
mm,
BRICS because they wanted to be in a relationship with Russia. They joined BRICS because
mm,
they want to be in a relationship with China.
mm,
And I think we're going to see more of that, right? The Saudis are talking about joining BRICS. Um, and so the future, I think, is that the Chinese will little by little eat away at the United States' ability to influence the world. One of the great events, great, I shouldn't say great, but one of the, I think, events that highlight this is what happened with the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
mm,
You know, Obama signed it. Bernie said he hated it, and he had reasons to dislike it. Trump said he hated it, and then Hillary Clinton, who was for it, changed her position. So no matter who won, it was going to go away. And the reason Bernie hated it was because it didn't do enough for labor. And the United States pulls out because Trump becomes president. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is renegotiated. A bunch of labor stuff gets put into the treaty, and the treaty ends up being a pretty good treaty. And it gets ratified, and the United States isn't in it. And
mm,
and it's like, first of all, the United States was the reason why there was no labor stuff in it. So the irony is Bernie was against the thing for the reason that the United States had caused. So right, it was like this feedback loop.
mm,
And
mm,
then now everybody who's a member is benefiting from this alliance. The United States got left behind. And I think we're going to
mm.
see that more and more and more as we go into the future, especially with, Trump will have a third term and a fourth term, and uh, it'll
Oh,
be just
tell me that isn't true. Tell me that isn't true. I mean, there are many people that I've spoken around the traps with regard to the potential for Trump to launch a coup of sorts. I personally don't know whether he has the backing for such a thing. Although there is a very interesting phenomenon that's taking place within the United States right now. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But do you really think that it's possible For the current US president at his age to do something so egregious to the American Republic as to overturn the Constitution in order for him to maintain power in perpetuity.
I mean, I like to look to the past to make my predictions about the future.
Mm.
On January 6, 2021, he attempted a coup d'etat in the United States. So I think just based on that, that the probability he will attempt a coup d'etat going forward is extremely high. The
Right,
way I see
right.
it is that was the Munich Putsch, and
Yep.
yeah, and 1932 was 2024, and so the next election will be a fake election, right? Because the election that followed up the November 1932 German election was totally a rigged election. Um,
Mm.
if he runs for a third time, the Constitution says a constitutional amendment was made to prevent the president from serving more than 10 years or two terms. He's got his two terms, so he cannot run a third time.
Mm.
Um, if he does run, who's going to stop him? It's not the Republican Party. He's basically purged the party and turned it into his own sycophantic yes people institution. They celebrate the weirdest stuff like this, big beautiful bill getting through. I still can't comprehend why they think they're going to get reelected
Mm.
after all their voters lose Medicaid. Um, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe the voters are so into cognitive dissonance that they'll just vote for him no matter what happens to them.
Mm.
But
Mm.
so if it's not the Republican Party, it can't be the Supreme Court. At least five of the Supreme Court justices are monarchists and would love to see Trump become president forever. So that's not going to stop him. And the Democratic Party, they're not going to stop him because they're a bunch of cowards. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like every time Chuck Schumer opens his mouth, all I can do is laugh because his resistance is so preposterous. Um, so what's left? Protests in the streets. California declares its independence. Is the United States military going to step up and save the republic? Those are the only options I can think of: protests, civil war, military coup. The American people don't understand protesting anymore. The U.S. used to be filled with protests. They were nonstop protests. After the 60s, it was like somebody hit a light switch and they protest here or there and a few days. There's no sustained movement. And if you don't have a sustained movement, you can't influence policy. Biden had 4 years to stop Trump from being reelected. Couldn't pull it off.
Mm. I agree and share your pessimism, but there is one thing that might undo the Trump apple cart. Do you think that the Jeffrey Epstein affair, particularly with respect to Trump's long past associations, but also to that mysterious client list, has any real traction for Trump 47? Trump is, after all, the Teflon king where no accusation, political or otherwise, seems to stick. But this is really rocking his base in a surprising manner, I would argue.
Yeah, we've seen this before, when he did the coup d'etat, the failed coup in January 6th. He lost his base. Like a bunch of people were, I will never vote for that man again. And he came back. The,
Mm.
it was to the point where Republicans who had just recently been kissing his feet were saying, yeah, this is terrible. We need to consider doing something to him. The Democrats impeached him in the House. It went to the Senate, and the Republicans protected him. Um, and then he recovered, and Biden had 4 years to stop him from becoming president again, and he couldn't stop him. So at the end of the day, I think here's what's at stake in the mind of Americans. The white population has been shrinking as a percentage of the population for decades by about 0.4% per year. And so right now, I think whites are 59% of the US population. In 1960, they were 85%. So white people have suddenly noticed that there's this huge brown and black community surrounding. And they did the math and they went 0.4% per year. In 20 years, the United States will no longer be majority white.
mm,
And I think, or 22 and a half years. I think when they made that calculation, it sent them into panic mode. And then Obama got elected president, and they went, "Oh my God, we have a black president. How can we undo this?" And Trump comes along, and his first campaign speech is that Mexicans are rapists and murderers. And and the white population went, "Oh my God, finally a racist running for president who feels the way I do about brown and black people. I'm going to vote for it." So at some level, what's happened is there's a huge cadre of voters who have set aside their own well-being. They've set aside the well-being of the United States. They've set aside world peace, everything, because they're hoping that somehow the United States' white majority or white identity, white privilege can be sustained. And because of this, they're willing to sacrifice everything, including the republic itself, to the point where you're now hearing Americans say, "We're not a democracy, we're a republic." They don't know what the word republic means. They they
yeah,
they think republic means monarchy because
mm,
they went to crap schools because Reagan cut education funding, and we've had
mm,
garbage schools in the United States for the last 40 years. And now
yeah,
Americans run around going, "We're a republic." Yeah, we are. We've always been a republic. James Madison, the author of our Constitution, wrote in Federalist Paper number 10, I considered doing a democracy. I chose to do a republic. Like, this is not a secret. But they don't know
mm,
what it means. And so they think it means monarchy.
mm, mm, mm.
And so the fact that we're here is just, I can't, I'm having a hard time finding hope.
Just on what you were saying earlier, because it's a fascinating discussion, and because political correctness, being as it is, cutting both ways and all that kind of stuff, I want to get straight to the chase on this one because you mentioned white people, the white population in the United States is declining, and certain people within that population group are realizing that it is almost like an existential threat to whatever's left of it. So if it's now 59%, in a few years' time, it'll go down to 55%. It's starting to look not like that they have control over the structures of the United States. So if we bring race into this, what do you think was the thing that prevented middle class people from, I don't know, having children? Um, was it the middle class income trap? Is it the fact that housing is unaffordable? Is it the fact that the employment market is so constricted that, unless you come from overseas and are willing to do things that white people aren't willing to do, that you just don't get a leg in anymore? I mean, uh, was this an own goal by America, the white American establishment, to a great degree?
The answer is yes to everything you've said. There's affluenza as a part of this problem. Part of it is white privilege. Because
Yeah.
you think about what is here, I'm going to take it up a notch. White male privilege is a person who's always received white male privilege.
Mhm.
Um, what happens is you have a hiring committee. There's, two white men, three people who are brown, black, and women, or some combination. The odds are one of the two white men is going to get the job. And the
Mm,
reason is because the implicit bias is built into us so hard that you'll have brown, black, and women people on a hiring committee picking the white man because it's so ingrained into us culturally. The problem with that is that white guy might have been mediocre compared to some of the other candidates. And so the tragedy of it is that guy is in a job he shouldn't be doing. It should have gone to a different person. And he ends up spending his whole time overcompensating for his mediocrity. And
mm,
that's the system that was, and we're paying the price for it because it's our politician class, it's our CEOs, it's the people who are running the show who have benefited from this, who weren't the best, because the United States is the furthest thing on the planet from a meritocracy, to the point where even Hollywood jobs, name your favorite actor, look them up. Their parent was probably an actor in Hollywood. Even Hollywood has become hereditary. And the whole
mm,
idea behind moving away from a hereditary system was to allow competition to create the kind of excellence required you would have to create the kind of excellence necessary to get the job. Well, that's gone. That's the damage of white male privilege or a hereditary system is you don't have to be excellent. We can be mediocre. You
Ah,
suggested
right.
it. It's expensive to
Yeah,
have kids.
it is. Yeah.
And so if you educate people and then you give them a okay job, but it has crap pay, you can't expect them to want to have a bunch of children.
Mm,
And I think so in a really strange way, the United States has sort of created this system where white population in the United States has negative population growth.
mm,
If you look at children under age 8 in US public schools, it's too late. They missed the boat. They should have been. White people needed to be popping out babies like there was tomorrow, no tomorrow if this was really their issue. What they
mm,
should do now is they should try to do mixed race marriages with everybody they can, so that they just muddle the race thing and get rid of it. And
mm.
that's the path for white liberation at this point. Not
Yep.
trying to reverse back to Jim Crow. But their instinct is to go back to Jim Crow. They want to make it 1930
Mm,
again and have segregation.
mm.
They want to return back to the old way, which is really awful.
Well, it's awful, and there's that smack of desperation to everything that you've just said. I mean, when people are under threat, obviously from a historical perspective, they reach up for their, they reach for their cudgels, and they, start looking for violent means to turn stuff around. But I mean, in order to do what you say in America, it's a very strange thing. I mean, I married an Ethiopian lady whom I met in Abu Dhabi, and we've got two beautiful children, obviously mixed race. In Australia, we don't make a big deal about it. In America, there's that sort of strange thing where mixing of blood is still considered forbidden. It's a sin of sorts among certain communities. Can you explain to our Australian audience and our non-American audience where that all came from and how this explains a lot of what you've just said?
Yeah. So if you look at other colonial experiences, so for example, the French in Haiti, the French believed that if a child was half black, half white, they deserved to be in a separate class. They became
Mm.
mulatto.
Yeah.
So for the French, there was a three-tiered system, right? The whites, the mulattoes, and then the slaves.
Mm.
Because you didn't want your half white child to be enslaved. In the
Mm.
United States, by contrast, uh, there was this concept that you were part black, you were black. So the classic example of this is what Thomas Jefferson's family. So Thomas Jefferson married a woman that was older than him, and she was rich. And then her father died, he inherited then all that wealth. And then when she died, he began a relationship. He actually almost certainly had a relationship before she died, but it's okay. We'll
Mm.
just pretend with a slave named Sally Hemings.
Mm.
Well, Sally Hemings was Jefferson's dead wife's half sister because Sally Hemings, as a slave, was the product of a slave master relationship. So
Right.
ironically, he was married to two half sisters. He was never officially married to Sally Hemings, but he did free her secretly while he was still alive. He freed the rest of
Mm.
his slaves in his will, but he freed her secretly. We found the document, I think 10 or 15 years ago. We didn't know this until a few years ago. Somebody was rifling through an old stack of papers and they were like, this is Sally Hemings' emancipation. But Sally Hemings' mother was also the product of a slave master relationship. In other words, Sally Hemings was actually only a quarter black. Jefferson's children, who were born into slavery because they were born from a slave mother, were 1/8 black. If you had walked onto Monticello, the plantation, Jefferson's plantation, you would have seen people who presented as white walking around as slaves because a person who's 1/8 black, odds are you won't know that they weren't anything but pure white at that point. So it was such an issue that decades later, Jefferson's great grandson, I believe it was, tried to join the United States Army in the United States Civil War to fight the South. And
Mm.
they didn't know if he was white. even though he was by that point, like 132nd or one, because it's
Mm.
generations later. And to hearing determine whether or not Jefferson let him become an officer in the United States Army. By contrast, Jefferson's great great grandson became the first black member of the California state legislature. Nine
Right.
states in the United States have what's called a one drop rule. It says if you're part black, you're all black. There's no differentiation. And the Supreme Court decades ago declared that that was unconstitutional, but those states never removed that from their law book. So if the Supreme Court reverses itself, which you know it will, then those laws will come back into effect. So if you're 1/128th black, and according to 23andMe, I'm 1/128th Ethiopian, which
Mm.
I didn't wasn't a complete surprise, but it was a surprise.
Right.
So according to Texas, I'm a black man, even
Mm.
though like I'm 1/128th. I'm proud of it, by the way. I love the idea that I'm part Ethiopian. So
Well, actually, I love it too. So next time we catch up, Roy, we're going to have Ethiopian coffee.
I
There you
can't
go.
wait.
Yes.
So that's the reality in the United States is there's this concept of racial purity that inspired the Nazis. The Nazis didn't come up with that. That was a US idea that got transmitted to the Nazis. Just like
Yeah.
apartheid, that wasn't come up with by Afrikaners. That was a US idea called segregation that the Afrikaners then
Mm.
used the Dutch word for.
Yeah.
People are always like, that's apartheid. It's like, no, dude, you just say that's segregation. We did it first. That wasn't worse than what we did. That was what inspired what they did.
Mm.
Here's another piece to that. In the United States, there's no concept of saying you're mixed race. So the idea is
Right.
you pick the race you look like. So if you're a mixed race and you look Hispanic, you
Mm.
say I'm Hispanic. If you look white, you might get away with sneaking in as white. You
Mm.
need to be
Mm.
careful, make sure you don't have an accent, and
Mm.
your last name shouldn't give it away if possible. But if you, so that's also part of the culture is that there's this attempt by people who are just white enough that they can pass as white, that they'll slip in and become white. And it really is skin color. It doesn't like if you have two kids from the same family, one is dark and one is light, the lighter kid will definitely benefit from their lighter color skin.
Whoa, I gotta say, it is so weird. But anyway, um, so what about the reverse of that? Let's now talk about black and colored communities. I mean, yes, the white community, as you've well established, is on the downside. But what hope do you have that the brown and black communities in the United States will be somehow morally better than the whites as the inheritors of a white system? Do you understand what I'm trying to get at? It's like,
I do.
at the moment what we're talking about is a hierarchy based on on race with the whites on top and everyone else down the pecking order. But if that were to be reversed, say the whites decide, well, look, it's all too difficult. We're getting to become smaller and smaller as a community. We'll just retreat into our little walled villages and not have any, people of color around us. What will then say Hispanics or blacks who are then in charge of the United States experiment do? Will they inherit white prejudice as part of the power structure, or do they come to power with something completely different that we're just not aware of? Because I mean, if you look at places like Latin America or Africa or the Middle East, I mean, I don't know. They have their own prejudices. They've got their own
So
repressive instruments. So, I mean, human is human. This is the thing that I think we
exactly.
tend to forget when we talk about, critical race theory and all that. We like to buttonhole everyone down into their particular areas, but in the end, strip all that rubbish away. We're human beings, and we will oppress, we will rule over, we will do whatever the hell we like once we're in a sort of hierarchical structure.
Right. I totally agree with you. The reality is when people, especially if you've been repressed for long enough, you're probably going to want some form of vengeance. People get into power. That your struggle is going to be to try to tame those urges. Having
Mm.
said that, I do have a bit of hope, and that hope comes from the African American community. If you read Black literature, Black struggle literature, the level of sophistication, morality, ethics that has been that has come out of Black liberation is really heartening. So my people are gonna say I'm a racist. My fear is the brown community actually, and Asians and Hispanics. And one of the reasons is I think the white population has done such a good job of creating in the United States this three-way hierarchy where it's white, brown, black on bottom, that the brown population feels it's so close to being white. If it can just vote Republican, it whitens itself. If it can just be
Mm,
a little bit more religiously fanatic, and go to church just a little bit more, it whitens itself somehow. And
mm,
that adjacency to whiteness, that closeness to whiteness, I think has corrupted their souls. This is especially true for the Iranian American community, the Venezuelan
mm,
community, the Cuban American community. Like I'm calling you out because you need to rethink this.
mm,
You're on an ugly path.
mm, mm,
And especially because when white people look at them, they do not see white people. They see people that they want to oppress. They don't see, oh, you're adjacent to me. They don't see that at all. And so there's a lot of self-delusion that's going on in these immigrant communities where they think somehow, like if I love Modi as much as I love Trump and I'm Indian American, that somehow it'll whiteify me, and they're wrong. And if you get into power because they are so poorly developed ethically, morally, it would be another disaster. It would just be more of the same garbage. Well, that's the big problem with the United States is there isn't a movement to try to develop the United States as an ethical experiment. It's all about how can I cut my taxes and screw my neighbor. And in the United States, because we're completely segregated, to the point where the neighborhood I lived in was a mixed race neighborhood. Like we even have mixed race neighborhoods. So immediately adjacent is an all white neighborhood. It looked, my son joined the swim team. It looked like he joined the Hitler Youth. And then our neighborhood was mixed race. And then, you go a few neighborhoods over and it's entirely Hispanic. Because we're so segregated out like that, then we vote as these blocks. It's a regional thing as well as a racial thing. And you're like, there's no way to reconcile if you keep this us versus them mentality all the time. At some point, if you want to be a community, you're going to have to go, you know what? How do we figure out how to be a community? And there's no real conversation about this.
Yeah, look, in many ways, I'm quite happy to be in Australia because we really, I mean, we went through our own peculiar problems. And I mean, I don't want to bore our listeners with details of my life, but I distinctly remember being of Central European origin did not favor me at a private school that I went to. But nonetheless, we seem to have taken steps out of that morass, whereas the United States looks like it's still stuck there and it's now in the 21st century. And you would have expected
Yeah,
that there would be some new social compact that would come forward
yeah,
to save everybody. I don't care what color your skin is, but
yeah.
if you happen to fly the flag and you're an American, that should be enough. That should be your passport to your ticket to success, if you will, right? But
Agreed.
anyway, yeah.
It's stupid that it's 2025 and we're still having these conversations. It makes you wonder what happened in the 60s. One time we were on a road trip, my wife and I, and we were flipping through the cable channels on the TV in the hotel, and we hit some sitcom from like 1979. And I was like, watch this for just a moment. So she's watching it a little bit and she goes, oh my God, these are conversations we need to be having today. They were having them in 1979. Like in sitcoms in 1979, they were talking about gender issues and race issues that we haven't tackled yet. And you're
Mm,
thinking, why? Why are we
mm.
spinning our wheels and going there? I don't understand.
Yeah, very, very odd. I mean, for all the advancements that the United States have made in terms of military technology, technology more generally, all the money that they've managed to accumulate since the end of World War II has not made them a better society. It is something
Exactly.
that really should make us sit back and scratch our heads because, if the American experiment goes down, we all go down with it, strangely enough.
Yeah.
America is too big and too irresistible for multiple countries, including the likes of China, strangely enough, because of those interlinkages by trade, that if something really bad happens over there, it'll have international repercussions, which is a horrible thing to think of.
People keep talking about civil war in the United States. If that happens, it's going to take out the entire global economy.
Yeah, 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 it will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, uh, we have to go back to MAGA to find out just, how much. No, no, that's not the expression that I want. What are the legs on the movement? I mean, do you think that MAGA is evolving beyond Trump? Is it becoming more of a cultural political movement that can outlast him? Or is it still wholly tied to his charisma and identity? I mean, some people say that MAGA is no more than a cult. What's your view on this?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's an important question that we need to solve. My take right now is it really is just about Trump. That
Right.
it's a cult of personality. So that as things stand right now, my prediction would be if Trump were to, like, say, resign tomorrow, the MAGA movement would fall apart as we know it. Having said that, I think it would then morph into a new movement with a lot of the same tendencies and a lot of the same beliefs. The question is, would there be a leader available who could take Trump's place or not? When I look at the play, the field, I know JD Vance thinks he's the guy, and Pete Hegseth is
Yeah.
probably dreaming about being the guy. I don't think either of those guys or anybody else that I know of at this moment anyway would fill Trump's shoes.
Mm,
So I would predict that it would just be this irritant movement on the sidelines that, continue to harm the Republican Party, but wouldn't necessarily have the kind of power that it has now without Trump. Um, but who knows? In 2 years, a lot can happen, and maybe somebody will start to rise up through the ranks that can replace him. One of the nice things about having a narcissist like Trump is he will not allow it that if he can
mm,
stop it, because he'll be jealous of that person. So, like
mm.
when Elon and him were boyfriend girlfriend, it was really clear, I think, to anybody who knew anything about Trump that that wasn't going to last. I had predicted that it would be over by April. It lasted a little bit longer than I thought it would. I kept thinking Night of the Long Knives, and that
Mm.
Musk was going to just wake up with a dagger in his back, because in my mind he was Ernst Strom. But that didn't it didn't quite turn out that way. But it's still, the relationship ended and they're broken up now. That's very sad. But I think that would be what would happen if there was somebody rising up through the ranks, right? That Trump would start to
Mm.
call them names and attack them and push them back down. So it's
Mm.
entirely possible there won't be a replacement for him.
Okay, you're listening to the Focus podcast. My guest today is Dr. Roy Casagranda, and we're deep diving into the political, moral, and strategic questions shaping Trump's second presidency. If you're enjoying this conversation, please share this episode, subscribe to the Focus podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a review. Now, let's get back to the discussion. All right, Roy, since Trump regained the presidency, some have observed that there's been an ideological hardening, with red states becoming more red and blue states becoming bluer. If this is indeed true, how do you see the American political republic kind of evolve? I mean, it was really interesting. A friend of mine who is a Yankee from New York originally, he has another friend of his from New York City come down, and I had the pleasure of having a discussion with him on politics because, of course, when we gather around, we always talk about politics. And his observations, being a New York Democrat, were very interesting. And, we talked about the fact that conservative Californians who dress very oddly, they dress, the women folk in particular, they dress kind of like very, like one of those, well, I don't, those strange people that live out in the wilderness and have very strong religious beliefs. I don't know what
Ah,
you guys call them, but you know what I mean. They've got this particular look
yes.
about them. These people, if they live in a blue state, basically are now packing their bags and heading to a red state where they feel that they can be with their political brethren, if you will. In red states in Texas, the people who are like democratically inclined are now also packing up and moving off to blue states. This is the sort of hardening that one would expect in a pre-Civil War situation, where the hardening of political opinions means the geographic displacement of people. So people are not willing to live next to their political opponents anymore because they find them so offensive. So the next best thing is to pack their bags, head off to the state of their political orientation, and hunker down in their belief structure. This is not good for the American Republic and for American democracy.
Oh, I totally agree. Okay, so Robert Putnam wrote a book, uh, in 2000 called Bowling Alone, where he actually talks about this. And it was the, for the record, it was the first book I ever got as once I was a professor. They sent it as a free book so you could assign it to your class. And so that book, see, basically what Putnam had noticed was not only were people moving from blue states to red states if they were conservative and vice versa, but they were moving to red cities or to red neighborhoods within cities. In other words, there
Mm,
was this ideological segregation going on in the United States. And
mm,
now he noticed it in 2000 because it had already been going on. It had going on definitely since Reagan,
mm.
but there were seeds of it even under the Nixon administration. So we've been working on this project to divide America ideologically for 40 to 50 years. And one of the reasons why this happened was, well, there's a few reasons, but the United States political parties used to be unideological, which is a really weird thing to say. So if you
Mm,
were a
mm.
conservative, we'll make it 1950. If you were a conservative in 1950, odds were you were a Democrat. If you were a
Yeah.
liberal in 1950, odds were you were a Democrat. The Republican Party had people that Americans today would call libertarian, but identified as conservatives. And the Republican Party had populists. So populists in the true sense, not the way the news media uses it today. So a populist is a person who wants the government involved in moral questions, like should should you allow gay marriage? No. Should you allow abortion? No. But then they would agree with the liberal on economic issues. Yes, we should take care of the poor. Yes, we should have minimum wage, right? So the Republican Party was this weird polar opposite ideology coalition, and the Democratic Party was even more extreme polar opposite ideological coalition, so that neither party actually had much of an ideological position because the conservative and liberal Democrats had to compromise before they approached the Republicans, and the same was true in the Republican Party. So as a result, in the 50s and 60s, most legislation tended to be very moderate. The big exception was the stuff coming out of the South was very racist. Other than that, the policies tended to be quite moderate. They didn't move very much. What happened was a series of events starting with 1964 Civil Rights Act under LBJ, and then George Corley-Wallace running for president in 1968, and then Nixon winning the election in 68, and then Reagan running for office first in 76 and 80, and then Reagan getting up and saying to the American public, the Democratic Party is the liberal party, the Republican Party is the conservative party. And all of a sudden, and I shouldn't say all of a sudden, it took 20 years. But for a 20-year span of time, conservative Democrats slowly began to convert to the Republican Party. And that meant then that the Republican Party was hijacked by conservatives, right? Because it hadn't been a coalition of conservatives. But the Democrats then lost their conservative wing, and now it became a liberal versus conservative issue where it had never been that before. That then was added to by the Republican Party doing this first, Democrats caught on later, villainizing the other side and talking about the other side as if they were evil, as if
Mm,
they were, enemies of the state, to the point where, Reagan's saying, I won't say the L word, liberal, because it's so disgusting, so vile. It's a cuss word. And that kind of rhetoric in the beginning maybe seemed innocent because maybe people weren't taking it that seriously. But over the years, the repetition of the big lie over and over and over again, it stuck. And the next thing you know, we do hate each other's guts. And it's stupid because it's over policy issues, right?
mm,
Why do you hate each other over policy issues? These are fundamental core issues. Like I believe in cannibalism and you hate cannibalism. These are, should we build light rail or not kind of issues.
mm,
And those shouldn't create the kind of emotion that they do. And the reason why that happened was the politicians realized the trick wasn't convincing the other side you were right and winning their votes. The trick was getting your base to show up and vote. And the only
mm.
way you could get your base to show up and vote was to make them emotional enough that they would get off of their lazy asses and go to the voting booth. And it turns out hatred and fear are really good motivators to get people to vote. And disgust will turn voters off. So your goal
Mm,
is to disgust the other side and fill your
mm,
side with hatred and fear. And that's what we've done. And as a result, we've polarized the United States into this really dangerous situation. And you're right. The United States every year gets there's less and less purple, and it becomes redder and bluer as time goes by. There's been
yeah.
some weird shifts, like Pennsylvania has become purple, Wisconsin has become
Mm,
purple. Um, Having said that, one of the interesting things has been, since you brought up these California conservatives, a lot of them moved to Texas, a lot of them moved to
mm,
Austin, and they were
yeah.
there a few years, and they've started to slowly move back to California because they missed having a government. It turns out that
Right.
their libertarian dream of no government
Mm,
had really interesting consequences, like garbage public schools, for example.
mm,
In the event
mm,
that there's a freeze, the whole state is destroyed and crippled, and there's no power and water. And I think they came to they were like, oh, with COVID lockdown, I can move anywhere. I'm going to leave California where I'm heavily taxed, and I'm going to go
mm,
experience my conservative utopia. And a bunch of them didn't like it.
mhm,
They slowly
mhm.
started to return back to a place that has a functioning government.
Wow, amazing. Many Americans in our audience will take offense to this. Don't take offense. This is just a casual observation, please. Anyway, the problem really is the voluntary voting system that you guys have. I mean, we have problems here in Australia with politically motivating people to head to the polls, but voting is considered mandatory. It's sort of ingrained in our culture. We may not like it, but we've got the democracy, the obligatory democracy sausage. You know, the guy tending the barbecue at the lines for the election, which I think now is very deeply embedded within the Australian psyche. So when we, think election, we think about having a sausage while we're waiting to cast our ballot. But we also have this thing called the Westminster system, things that we got from the Brits. And there we have an organized opposition. Now, of course, it's not perfect. And yes, organized oppositions can also fall by the wayside or become very weak if confronted by a strong leader. But the thing is that at least we have them on paper and in a building. You guys have no organized opposition. Whoever's in government governs. So now you've got Trump and
Yes.
MAGA, and then you've got
Yeah.
Schumer and Pelosi. That's your best bet. That's your opposition. That's
Mhm.
not an opposition. That's really weak.
It's not an opposition.
And of course, the people who are really wanting to manipulate the system can get away with almost anything because of the volunteer voting thing you've just said. To excite the base, you've got to be racist. You've got to be revolutionary, radical, destabilizing. That's the thing that actually splits people apart and makes them cohere around whoever it is that's the rabble rouser. So it's a yeah. It's a terrible thing being a foreigner talking about American democracy, but from an outsider's perspective, and because this is a game changer for all of us if it all falls to pieces, we have to have some sort of discussion about where next. What can the Americans do to improve themselves, their society, in order to keep the rest of us going? Because as we said earlier, once America goes down, it's over for everybody. And I see that foreigners are stakeholders. I mean, foreigners like
Yeah.
close allies like Australians are stakeholders in the stability of the United States. And the thing that's freaking us all out at the moment is that we're not seeing that stability. And having this discussion with you at the moment seems to verify that fact, strangely.
In Texas, we actually passed a law. I didn't follow through, so I don't know exactly where it ended up, but let me rephrase it just so I'm on the safe side. We created a law, a bill that went through the Texas legislature. And if I remember correctly, it did pass that made it illegal to pass out water or food at the voting booths. And the reason was to help suppress voter turnout. Um, Harris County, the largest county in Texas, it's so large, it's literally one quarter of the population of Texas. And if you've ever looked at a map of Texas, one of the things that's really interesting is we have really small counties in terms of land area. I think we have
Mm.
235 counties, something
Wow.
ridiculous. Yeah, like it's insane how many counties we have because we have really small ones, and there's one
Mm.
that has 1/4 of the population. So
Mhm.
it is a very densely packed county. Having said that, there are parts of the county that are less dense, and those tend to be the conservative parts. And then
Mm.
the parts of the county that tend to be very dense are the liberal parts. So the Texas state legislature didn't like that Harris County distributed its voting booths by density, population density. It actually passed a law ordering Harris County to do it by square square footage, so
Mm.
that the densely populated areas wouldn't have adequate voting booths, and then the less populated areas would have an abundance of voting booths, so the lines would be shorter. And so we do things like this, these little gimmicky things. Also, periodically, a person will lose their citizenship in the United States, or they will be scrubbed from the voter rolls, and then you have to go through the whole process of proving you're a citizen or proving that you are a registered voter. So the goal in Texas is systematic, which is to suppress voter turnout.
Right.
Um, for years, university campuses would have voting booths, and the state legislature blocked that. Now universities can't have voting booths.
Mm.
Um, it used to be that the grocery stores would and the elementary schools would host the voting booths because there's no fixed place to do the voting. And now, the last few years, I find myself going to churches to vote. And the thought in my mind is, where's separation of
Mm.
church and state? How is it possible that I have to go to a church to cast my vote? That feels like that's, an erosion of this principle that we need to have separation of church and state.
Yeah. Roy, I was going to ask you. I mean, just stepping away from the domestic American electoral process. Um, many people, and us included, we always like to poke a little bit of fun at the Trump administration because there's a lot of material they throw our way. But I have to ask you, to be completely fair, there are some people who would push back and say, but Roy, the Trump administration had done a couple of things really good. Those two things would be getting NATO to lift their defense expenditure to 5% of GDP. And the other one would be to fix the southern border and stop the immigration flows, the illegal immigration flows into the United States. If you were to answer that, how would you answer that?
Yeah, so I agree that during the Trump administration, NATO has increased its spending. I think the method he used was a method that a weak person uses, which is to threaten not to show up. If the United States was
Mm.
truly strong, it should have been able to say, I need you to step up. You're not spending enough. I
Yeah.
also think that it wasn't actually Trump that motivated as much as people would like to believe. I think it was Putin who really motivated them to do this. So,
Yeah.
learning that the United States is no longer a reliable ally and facing this possibility of Russian westward expansion, NATO
Mm.
stepped up because I don't think it had a choice. That to me isn't a positive outcome. I think the positive outcome would have been that everybody knows the United States is a stable state that you can rely upon, and then NATO has stepped up uh, its spending. On the immigration side, I just don't understand why people are so freaked out about immigration, other than that it's a race issue. Because the immigrants in the United States are doing the jobs that the United States, born in the United States population doesn't want to do. They're the ones roofing. They're the ones picking their strawberries and blueberries. They're the ones
Mm.
who are picking up the garbage from the streets. They're doing the jobs that the average person born and raised in the United States wants nothing to do with. So if we stopped all that immigration, who would do those jobs? And they're doing it without complaining. They're amazing workers. They show up to work early. They leave work late. They get paid less. Like it's this gift. Now, as a
Mm.
person who doesn't like any of what I just said, I think they should be paid the same, and I think they should get health care, and I don't think they should be worked harder. I don't understand why you would be mad at that person. Um, if we weren't taking advantage of them and they were getting what I would prefer, which was equal pay and equal treatment, maybe I guess you can get mad at them because they're a better worker than you and they're stealing your job. but it's not your job because you didn't want to pick blueberries. And then
Mm.
the other end of it is all the immigrants who are coming in who are our brain surgeons and our heart surgeons and our computer scientists and our engineers. If more people who are born in the United States were willing to do the really hard work to get those degrees and get those jobs, we wouldn't need to bring in that immigrant population to do those jobs.
Yeah.
The United States is 6% Asian, and 30% of our MDs are from Asia. There's, it doesn't have to be that way. The U.S. born population could have stepped up and done those jobs, but it requires hard work and dedication. And that's the problem with affluenza. If I can make enough money to be comfortable, why would I do the extra work?
Yeah, that is true. And I mean, I can't
So I
imagine
say
that
open the borders.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, look, in many ways, and we've had this discussion here in Australia, and I think that we operate a much tighter regime. We've got Operation Sovereign Borders, but the thing is that Australia is an island continent. We can afford to be tougher, control immigration flows into the country because of our island structure. It makes it very hard for immigrants to get in anyway, whether it's illegal
That's
or
true.
legal. So, all right. I've got to ask you another race-based thing. I mean, it's funny. I was going to actually talk about Trump and talk about all kinds of ridiculousnesses that had happened since last we spoke, but now it's all about other things. And I
Yeah,
suppose New York City just saw Zoran Mamdani, a democratic socialist and pro-Palestinian voice, win significant traction. How do you interpret this result? And do you think he's an outlier, or do you think he's, the basis of an early sign of a shifting democratic base? I mean, I'm being optimistic here.
yeah, that's a great question. So, um, the answer is honestly, I don't really know. It
Mm,
could be that this is just a one-off outlier event, or it could be that there's a serious shift in the Democratic Party. One of the reasons I don't know is we have other people in the United States who are his caliber, who are like from that same political movement. AOC, obviously a big name in that direction. Bernie Sanders, another one. So he's certainly not the first person of that ilk who have gotten into politics. But
mm,
I think in this moment, when the United States has lurched so far to the right, that it's my 1930s alarm bells are constantly going off. It's interesting to see this guy come out of New York, especially because there's such a huge Jewish community in New York, and he is pro-Palestinian. One of the things we've definitely seen over the last year and a half is how many Jewish Americans have reconsidered their attachment to Zionism and are now reflecting back and going, maybe this isn't a great project, maybe this isn't a great idea. At the end of the day, when you take and strip all the surface stuff off, the real question at stake here is, are Palestinians human? And if they
mm,
are, then how is it justifiable to ethnically cleanse and murder them and genocide them on a continuing basis for since 1948? This isn't something that's happened for a year and a half. This has been an
mm,
ongoing project since 1948. And I think his election suggests exactly that there is this huge reflection moment taking place in the United States. If that's the case, then I am excited about his election because I'm hoping then we start to reflect on other things. For example, our imperialist policies. We start to reflect on the cruelty we inflict on refugees who are coming to the United States. Refugees are different from immigrants. Okay, you hate immigrants, fine, but how can you hate refugees? Refugees are fleeing violence. They are looking for a place for refuge, and we don't treat them well anymore. So there are lots of things that we need to be reflecting on, including how much we pay workers and how
yeah,
poorly we treat workers. If Mandani, because he agrees with me on most of those positions, if he is that, then this
mm,
is an exciting moment, and then it bodes ill for the Republican Party in the 2026 midterm elections. Um, if this is sort of just a blue liberal state event where New York City, this really leftist oriented city, is just reflecting itself, and there isn't anything going deeper than that, then I'm not that excited. Um, I don't have an answer better than that.
No, no, that's good. Although there is a little bit of confusion. I mean, from the non-American side of things, we weren't looking at the final election for New York City mayor, right? Or is
No,
this
this was
no?
just
So he was
this was
just
just the primaries
right. That he was the primary, the winner of the primary. So as the
for the
winner of the
Democratic Party.
yeah. So as that significant in and of itself, even if he ends up not getting across the line as mayor.
So my feeling is, and there's probably a lot of people who will disagree with me on this, that
Mm,
if he doesn't win the mayorship, then it wasn't really significant. It was just a
right.
one-off kind of thing. If he
Mm,
becomes mayor, I think that's where it becomes significant because so if you're a New Yorker and your choice is a Republican or Mamdani,
mm,
and you're thinking all the ways you disagree with Mamdani. So let's say you're a Zionist, for example,
mm,
and then you go, I can't stand Mamdani, I'm going to go vote for the Republican. Yeah. Right, that'll tell us what kind of a shift really did take place in New York. How many
right.
liberals are going to go vote for a Republican because they don't like Mamdani's positions?
Mm,
And then, for that matter, how many racists are
mm,
Democrats? Because that'll also be a part of this. Like
mm,
Kamala Harris was a much better candidate than Donald Trump 10 times a day when you looked at her policies and everything else. She had the misfortune of having too much skin color and not enough penis. And
mm,
as a result, she couldn't overcome US sexism and racism.
mm,
And it was mind-boggling to watch. You're like,
mm,
oh my
mm,
God, how you can't compare the two. They're not
mm,
in the same
mm,
league. And
mm,
you knew she never had a chance.
mm.
It was mind-blowing. So I think that's one of the things he'll have to overcome. He's fortunate that he's not a woman because
Right.
American sexism is profound. I mean, it is deep, and he doesn't have to
So,
overcome that.
so what you're saying basically is Americans can get over racism, they just can't get over sexism, right?
I mean, I think Obama and Hillary Clinton kind of proved that a little bit.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Good point. All right, so just moving on to our big beautiful friend Elon Musk, who no longer is in the White House. Elon Musk publicly criticized the one big beautiful bill and exited the so-called Department of Government Efficiency just after 130 days. How do you interpret the significance of this rupture? And Roy, what does this say about the stability of Trump's inner circle now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if it says anything about the stability in his circle, just because I think almost everybody in his inner circle is a sycophant who feels like they owe Trump. In the
Mm-hmm.
case of Elon Musk, I don't think he was a sycophant. I think he thought Trump was his sycophant and Trump owed him. And so the power vector was reversed. You can't, when you have two man children who are, have the maturity of, say, a 3 or 4 year old in the same room, and there's a series of toys, like let's say building blocks. At some point, one of them is going to pick up the building block and throw it against the head of the other one. Like it's guaranteed that that's going to happen, and that's of course exactly what happened. What what was shocking was it was just one issue. Like they disagreed over one issue, and that's it. The relationship's over. There was no room for, oh, I really don't like this. I'm against this. But let's see what else we can work on, which is exactly what you would expect from man babies. Um, in the case of the two men, of course, they're such over the top narcissists. It was impossible that the relationship could have lasted. There's no way. I think the fact that Musk now wants to create a third party is interesting because he's explicitly said our goal will just be to capture swing seats. Right, so his goal is to grab 5 or so Senate seats and maybe 10, 20 House seats so that in close votes he can flip it one way or the other.
Yep.
He could play a disruptive role. He definitely has the money to do it. In the United States, third parties don't usually last very long. They're like a good idea, and then people realize they're a bad idea, and then they fall apart. Um, so it'll probably be another experiment like that. But he certainly has the money to cause a disruption. I don't know that anything meaningful will come from it because in 20 years nobody will remember his name. But
We'll be living on Mars by that stage, don't you know? Which
right,
raises it raises another thing entirely, right? I mean, Musk's tilted politics was not what you would consider successful. So why would he invest more of his money in a sinking proposition by getting involved in politics even further? Because I mean, if the
yeah,
American Party were to get up, it's like, unless it's well organized, and nothing that Musk puts together from a political perspective looks like it's going to be well organized, he's just pouring good money after bad. So for me, I just don't see the sense in it. I mean, um, maybe there's a plan behind it. God only knows. People will say his engineering skills will automatically translate into politics. I would say
yeah,
having been, I would say having been in politics, I'll call BS on that. You're either a political animal or you're not. And Musk has shown a lot of, uh, well, what's the word I'm looking for here? Inexperience, I think would be the polite way of putting it. So there you go. That's just my take on that. But having said that, are we now looking at a war between Trump and Musk? And will this weaken Trump in any significant way? I mean, you said that, he's surrounded himself with his loyalists. The loyalists will go down with the ship, no doubt. But you're also right in saying that Musk can be a significant disruptor, and if he does, walk away from his businesses and just invest the rest of his money into, a political push of sorts, it's going to hurt at some point. It's going to hurt Trump. I mean, if Epstein
I agree.
doesn't, this will, right?
The fact that Musk said Trump's on the Epstein list, and then the Epstein list disappeared.
Right.
If Musk can somehow figure out how to push that, uh,
Mm.
like find the Epstein list, for
Mm.
example, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
He could, remember Trump kept saying, "What about her emails? What about her emails?" Maybe Musk could go, "What about that list? What about that list?" That could be his mantra for his American Party program. Is it just me, or does the eagle in the American Party symbol just look a little too much like the Nazi eagle? I don't know. I'm probably projecting.
Well, I would say my heart goes out to you, Roy, but if I do that, I'll
Please
be
don't do
banned
it.
from
Please don't
YouTube.
do it.
I'll be banned from
Yes,
YouTube.
don't do it. Don't do it.
No, 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 no. Oh my God, what a mess. What an absolute mess. Okay,
What
so
a mess.
the Department of Government Efficiency, however, now that Musk has departed, is that going on, or is that going to be sacrificed in this political showdown between Trump and Musk?
That is a fantastic question for many reasons. One, it was causing real harm. Like there
Mm,
was serious damage being done to the United States. I've talked to multiple government officials, and they said that part of their job then had become just trying to protect their employees and just trying to make it so that their employees weren't getting fired. And
mm,
that's not what government should be doing. Government should be implementing policy, not running around like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to figure out how to not lose its staff.
mm, mm,
Um, when you lose that level, that amount of talent, and think about all the training that went into getting those people to that level of competence, it's
mm,
going to take the government years to recover. So
mm,
my hope is that Doge will slowly just sort of fall out of people's memory, and we can go back to having a government that, the U.S. government was never a high functioning institution. That I
mm,
don't think anybody would claim that, but it can't function without its staff. So what kills me is the solution. Like in Texas, when a school is failing, the solution is we cut its funding. And you're like, dude, that's backwards. What you need to do is figure out how to make sure it
mm,
has adequate funding. Because
mm,
in
mm.
Texas, 90% of the time when a school is failing, it's because it has inadequate funding. It's like a starving person comes to the emergency room and you're like, when was the last time you ate? 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry, we don't feed starving people. We only feed people who have been eating recently. It's just the logic is awful. Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I feel like that's what we were doing with the federal government with Doge. It
Mm,
is worth pointing out that Musk was on an SNL skit a few years
mm,
ago where he said that Dogecoin was a Ponzi scheme, and then named his government agency Doge. I feel like he kind of admitted what he was doing from the beginning was a little off. SNL is obviously a great place for getting information real time. It's, because he knows comedy is the only reliable news media.
Incredible. Roy, on that hilarious note, God help me, I even said that out loud. Okay. On that hilarious note, thank you for joining us and for sharing your insights on the focus. And look, I really appreciate the amount of time you put in today. I know that you're pressed for time, so thank you.
Thank you so much, John. It's great being on the show.
Thank you. Today, we covered a lot of ground, from Trump's self-styled peace efforts in Ukraine and Gaza and Iran to the deepening questions around his cabinet's competence and the fallout from the Epstein saga. We looked at the Musk split and what Mamdani's rise says about shifting political winds in parts of the US. As always, I hope Roy's insights help make sense of a turbulent moment in US history. From Lebanon, that was Dr. Roy Casagranda. Thank you for joining me, John Bruni, for today's episode with Roy Casagranda. Check out the links in our show notes to learn more about Roy and to connect with him on social media. Now on to questions for the audience. Is Trump's attempt to position himself as a global peacemaker credible or a calculated political move? Should Epstein-linked controversies factor into how we view current political and corporate leaders? Does Mamdani's win signal the rise of a new left in US politics, or is it just a localized backlash? Let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's a free way to support us. You can also subscribe to the podcast on the Ozcast Network, iTunes, Spotify, where we'd appreciate your 5-star reviews. Do you have comments or questions about the podcast? Post them in the comments section on YouTube, and I'll do my best to respond to as many as I can. My thanks as ever to producer of The Focus, Neil Smart. Please stay connected with us on social media. Follow me on X at BruniDoctor, and follow The Focus on X at TheFocus_Sage. And don't forget Blue Sky on thefocuspodadl.bsky.social. From Adelaide, South Australia, you've been listening to The Focus.